imagine real live mermaids.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado.
And I am Dan Simon, broadcasting from the Studio Simon headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky.
Dan, good morning. Hello, how are you?
I am fantastic, Paul. How are you?
I am also fantastic. It is weirdly warm here in February in Colorado as we are recording this episode. Dan, the Baseball by Design podcast just very recently passed an important landmark. At the time of this recording, just a couple of days past the 3-year anniversary of, can you remember what? What was 3 years ago on Baseball by Design?
I do know the answer to this, and that was the birth of the Studio Simon Stumper.
Now, in honor of the Studio Simon Stumper, perhaps I should have asked that question in the form of multiple choices, or maybe 2 truths and a lie. But yeah, you've been on every single episode of Baseball by Design for 3/4 of the podcast's existence for 3 years. You've had a Studio Simon Stumper every single week, which is 156 weeks of Studio Simon Stumpers. So thank you, Dan, for being a part of every episode of Baseball by Design since then.
Well, you're very welcome, but full disclosure, and I think we've mentioned this before, there was one that I didn't do, which was when we were on one of our baseball road trips, and I was not aware we were going to be doing a segment live from Myrtle Beach, so I did not have a stumper prepared. So you did the stumper that week when we were at breakfast at that great pancake house.
That lives always in your head, Dan. I shouldn't have let it happen. I should have had you come up with a question on the spot or something, because I feel like that's a big sore thumb in the history of Studio Simon Stumpers.
I don't look at it that way. I just want to be transparent, but nor do I look at it as like something that leaves a bad taste in my mouth, because
okay. All right.
That pancake house left a good taste in my mouth. And do you remember that place?
Absolutely, I do. We had a fantastic waitress who was from New York. She still had her great accent. It was fantastic.
And another thing about that was when we were driving through Myrtle Beach to get to our hotel, we noticed 3 things that really seemed to stand out. One was there were a lot of motorcycles.
Yeah.
2 was there were a lot of miniature golf, putt-putt golf places, which we didn't do and we should have.
Yeah.
And the other thing was the plethora of pancake houses.
So many pancake houses.
It didn't make sense. It's like there were enough pancake houses for everybody individually visiting Myrtle Beach at any one time to go to a pancake house without anyone else there, because there were seemingly as many pancake houses as there were people, and there were a lot of people as well.
I remember that breakfast fondly, and to quote Homer Simpson, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. Dan, a couple episodes ago, you and I invited listeners of the Baseball by Design podcast to submit letters, and you specifically had a question because this was on the Salem Ridge Yaks episode. You wanted to know if people still used canoes. And guess what, Dan? We received our first letter. I'm going to read the first ever letter for inclusion on the Baseball by Design podcast. I hope this is the first of many, Dan.
A whole new segment. We need to get musical
we need
intros.
A jingle.
Yeah, for Ranger Amy has her intro done by Patrick Larson. Do I have
Pat
the
Larson,
name?
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And you have the Baseball by Design jingle, if that's what you want to call the music. I wish we had listeners who were musical and could record things and could do a Studio Simon Stumper intro.
Let's start there. If anyone out there has the wherewithal to do a Studio Simon Stumper intro, a jingle for Studio Simon Stumpers, we'd love to have it. I wonder if we have the critical mass of listenership to have something like that surface for us.
Well, but if we do that, we also need a listener email or listener letter jingle.
Yeah. We need to come up with a name for the segment. So
That
before we start talking about the Brevard County Manatees, Dan, I want to read our first ever letter from a listener.
all ears. Let's hear it.
Here we go. So Gerald Carpenter writes, and he says, "Hello, Paul in the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame and Dan in Louisville. I've written before, but I couldn't resist writing again once you dangled the becoming famous carrot. That was you, Dan. You said that. Of having my letter read on the air. I have a question and a related story. Of the 120 affiliated minor league baseball teams, how many have monikers that could conceivably be surnames of people living in this country? There's the obvious Knights and Barons, but beyond that, finding someone actually named Ace, Dash, Curve, Bull, or Clipper could be rare. Do you know anyone, or perhaps even have attended a game with someone with the same name as the team?" So it would be like if there were a team called the Pauls. There used to be the Danville Dans, right?
There currently is, there still is a Danville Dance. It's a collegiate summer league team in Danville. It's either Illinois or Indiana.
Oh.
So there is a Danville Dance, and I think there were previous Danville Dans. Oh, yes, I believe in Danville, the former well, still it's an Appalachian League
Yeah,
city. They're just not affiliated anymore.
right.
Danville, Virginia, there used to be the Danville Dance. Yeah.
Yeah. And you famously created the logo for the Danville Dairy Daddies. You haven't been to a Dairy Daddies game, have you? Would that count for this question if you Dan went to a Danville Dairy Daddies game?
Well, that depends on did our writer, our letter writer, email sender, he said surnames. So does the city name count
I don't
in
know.
it, or does
I,
it have to be the
our
nickname or
our
whatever?
first ever letter may require clarification. So but Gerald also had a story. He says, "This leads me to my story. Last year, I took my own baseball palooza-like road trip inspired by your podcast, which I absolutely love. If this podcast is inspiring people to take road trips, my goodness, yes. And visited all 8 teams in the AA Southern League. When I found myself in the Shuckers shop, the team store of the Biloxi Shuckers, I took pics of the Shuckers merchandise and sent them to my cousin of the same name, Lisa Shucker. Hello, shout out to Lisa Shucker back home. Shuckers shirts and Shuckers pennants and Shuckers license plate holders and a gaudy Shuckers logo on a big steel chain. And of course, a Shuckers ice cream helmet. She loved the fact that she shared a name with the team and wanted all the souvenirs. I suggested we do one better, and we both plan another trip later this year. So many raid trips. So a couple months later, we loaded up the car in central Pennsylvania, where we only shuck corn, and headed to Biloxi to take in a Shuckers game to clean out the team store. This reminds me of Eric Profit from the Earned Fun Average podcast. He has some El Paso Chihuahua caps because the EP logo is also his initials. And I've often thought of getting myself one of the PC logos from the Peoria Chiefs. So anyway, Gerald continues. I contacted the team ahead of time, and they arranged for Ms. Shucker to throw out the first pitch, complete with an introduction, and also acknowledged her on the scoreboard during the game. The next day, we had a private stadium tour, and we ended up with a buffet in their luxury box, all because her name was Shucker. They showed us true Southern hospitality. This turned out better than we had expected and was definitely the highlight of our trip to Mississippi, and they made a lifetime Brewers fan, her, not me, go Phillies, he says, go Phils, go Phils. We hope to go up the ladder to Nashville this year to follow the career of the pitcher who caught her first pitch. So if you have any friends or listeners named Roger Renegade, Larry Lookout, or perhaps Carl Quake, perhaps they can have a similar experience. I enjoy your podcast and listen to all the episodes. That's so kind, Gerald. Thank you. The now famous Gerald Carpenter, that's how he signs off. And he says, P.S. I have not used a canoe in the last decade, but I have rented a kayak, or a yak as we call them now, once in that time. There you go. Our first ever letter, Dan.
Yeah, well, it's a great letter.
Thank
Covered
you, Gerald.
a lot of good stuff there. It's amazing that he personally knows somebody named Shucker.
Lisa Shucker, his cousin.
And then also answering, it's a very small sample size, but we have yet to hear from somebody who does currently still use a canoe. So
Yeah, that's true.
thank you for answering that question as well. It just, yes, I really feel that kayaks have replaced canoes.
Well, speaking of waterways, let's talk about the Brevard County Manatees, Dan. This is a logo that I would describe as beloved. It's a little bit of a different episode. We're going to be speaking with J.P. Brooker, who is with the Ocean Conservancy. He's located in Florida, and he was in Brevard County when that team debuted, and he participated in the Name the Team contest and is a baseball fan and is also obviously involved in ocean conservation. So he's got a lot of insight into manatees and this team, the Brevard County Manatees. But I wanted to ask you before we get to JP, this logo debuted very close to the time that you were really setting out on your sports design career. Studio Simon wasn't officially around until 2001, but in 1994, and as we've discussed, you did logos before that, but you set out on your own with Studio Simon in 2001. You were creating logos for 5, 6, 7 years prior to that. So mid 1990s, Dan Simon, minor league baseball logo designer, is getting going. This Brevard County Manatees logo is, brand new as of 1994. So I just out of curiosity, the logo itself, is it a good representation of minor league baseball logo design of that era? And then I'm going to ask you to follow up on that. Why do you think it's still so beloved 8 years after the team folded?
Well, to answer your first question, I think it's a very good example of the sports design minor league baseball design, identity design of that time. It was it's not the first, but it's amongst the first teams where they started naming teams after more interesting animals than just, Mustangs and give me some other ones.
Eagles and bears and tigers.
Yeah. So manatees there had never been, as far as I know, a professional sports team named after a manatee that preceded this one. So it was, again, it wasn't the first, but it was amongst the first. And then your other question was, why do you suppose it's so beloved? Two reasons. One is I believe because it represents a time over 30 years ago. We always look back on the past fondly. I shouldn't say we always do. We often do. And it represents that time and those early days of a little bit more creativity in sports design. But in addition, it's the same thing with the Rome emperors. Nobody doesn't like a penguin, and nobody doesn't like a manatee. They're one of the world's most wonderful creatures.
Right. Like who says friggin' manatees? But like 1994 in minor league baseball, you had the Portland Sea Dogs right around that time, right? And they have a sort of similar sort of cutesy harbor seal with ears. We understand that makes it a sea lion, but that's creative license. What else? The Asheville Tourists had their bear on vacation logo right around that time, right? So there was sort of an adorableness quality that I think minor league baseball teams were introducing at that time. I remember seeing the Manatees logo for the first time, and I remember saying I felt like it looked like a label that you might put on a can of manatee meat. And I felt terrible saying that because they're beautiful endangered animals. But there was just something about the roundel element of it with the sort of label across it. So also a simpler time for logo design, right? You just had Manny the Manatee, and then you had a cap logo with an interlocking BC. And that was kind of it, right? You didn't have a lot of different permutations. And then as with other logos out there in the world, this one started with teal and black and ended up red and blue. It's a beloved logo, and as you say, people love manatees. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. We don't have a lot of manatees here, but whenever I get to a place where there are manatees, I try to see them. If I recall this, Dan, I think I've only ever seen a manatee in person in real life one time, outside of an aquarium. I've seen lots of them in aquariums, but I saw one of them in a bay, where boats were docked, and it was just sort of floating around, and that was cool. But I didn't get a great look at it, but I was excited to see a real manatee out in the wild.
I also have only seen a manatee in the wild once. We were in Key West, Florida, and we were staying at a hotel that had a marina immediately next to it, or in front of it, I guess we should say. And there was we were just there on walking on the dock where these boats were all parked. Is that you don't park a boat, do you? You
I think they were docked.
docked. There you
Yeah.
go. Thank you. Yeah, where the boats were docked. And there was, I don't know why, but there was water coming out of the back of one of these boats, like water coming out of a hose, but it wasn't a
Yeah.
hose. It was just out of the back of the boat. So, and it was going down into the water. And there was a manatee that had come up to that to drink that water. And we were literally 3 feet away from this manatee. It wasn't out off in the distance. It was right there. Manatees, I think, are famously known for being really friendly. They seemingly have no fear of humans, which is actually one of the things that has caused them
Yeah.
issues, like because they'll come right up to boats and they get hit by the propellers and things like that. But anyway, it was not bothered by there were other people there too, because this is as close as you're going to get to a manatee. And it was delightful. Just watching that thing drink that water was the most adorable thing. They're gigantic,
Yeah.
but they're adorable.
Yeah.
That's another reason why this is such a beloved identity is that you don't get much better than a manatee in the animal kingdom.
They have zero sharp edges. Like it's all just like smooth, round, and soft, right? Like so as a sports mascot, pretty funny. I love that they did that. I couldn't find, Dan, I feel bad about this. I could not find manatees like t-shirts online, and I desperately, desperately wanted one. So I actually made myself one. I just uploaded the logo to one of those, t-shirt producing companies, and I made myself one t-shirt, and then I took it down so that no one else tried to buy it, and I was going to actually make money off it. So I made myself a Brevard County Manatees t-shirt because I couldn't find one online. And I found manatees hats online, but they don't fit. So I've never been able to find a good manatees hat. This franchise, Dan, is after the manatees left Brevard County in 2016, they became the Florida Fire Frogs with a grandiose design. That team was only around for 4 years and then just basically just folded, just sort of vanished. But it's sad because you can't even do like a manatees throwback anymore because the franchise itself is just fizzled, just went away in 2020. And I don't know if it was part of the big like Vogon Destructor Fleet Major League Baseball takeover or if it was something else, because I feel like it was maybe going away even before all that happened. So anyway, Dan, it's a beloved logo. I'm glad to finally feature it here on the podcast. I'm going to go speak with J.P. Brooker of the Ocean Conservancy about his experience as a fan and his work with manatees at the Ocean Conservancy. And then you and I will be back. You'll be here with one of your Studio Simon Stumpers, year 4 of Studio Simon Stumpers.
Yeah, this is starting year 4, and I'm looking forward to another year and then another year after that. And we'll see how long we keep this thing going.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to be speaking with J.P. Brooker, who is the Director of Florida Conservation with the Ocean Conservancy in Florida. J.P., good morning. How are you doing?
I'm really great. Great to be here.
I am so thrilled to be talking about this logo. I mostly on this podcast cover extant logos, right? Like I don't do very many extinct logos. This is one I have been wanting to cover for a long time because I think it just has such a great charm about it and is, such a fun brand that people remember fondly. Obviously, this franchise, moved away from Brevard County and became the Florida Fire Frogs, and then that franchise sort of went away. That's not what we're talking about here. I have asked you to come on the podcast because as I was researching this team, I found an article that you wrote on the Ocean Conservancy's website called Manatees and Baseball, A Match Made in Heaven. And the article just, enthralled me. It was such a great read about this team from a baseball fan's perspective. So I'm going to start there, if you don't mind. You were a baseball kid growing up in the 90s. The Florida Marlins did not exist yet. And then suddenly there was going to be baseball in Brevard County, Florida. What was that experience for you?
Oh, it's super exciting. I mean, Growing up, we did have, spring training in Florida, and folks had their favorite teams and would travel and go see, the Blue Jays in Dunedin, or the Red Sox, or the Yankees, wherever you had to travel to go see them. We did have the Astros in Cocoa for a while when I was growing up, and there was, I believe, a farm team associated with the Astros for a little while, but we didn't make it out to a lot of games. And so when we learned that the Marlins were going to be opening up, starting a team in Florida, and even beyond that, having some initial exhibition games at the Cocoa Astrodome, which is what we called it for the longest time. All the kids that I grew up with were super excited, and I was just exactly at that prime little league age to be super, super excited about the Marlins getting started. And then, we had some favorite players who were coming through, and it was a super exciting time to be a baseball fan in Brevard County, which is a sort of sleepy part of Florida, or at least historically has been rather sleepy. I mean, it's not Miami, it's not Tampa, it's an hour east of Orlando. And when I was growing up, it was frankly quaint by comparison to the way it is now. And so something big like baseball coming to town, that was a big deal.
You, in the article, you talk about the name for this minor league team, and they put it out to a fan vote, and the fans like you were super excited for the opportunity to name a team. The examples that you list in the article, you said the Brevard Bull Sharks because of the scariness factor, and then you said the Brevard Blastoffs because of the proximity to the Kennedy Space Center, and then you said definitely not, and you landed on, not literally, thankfully, what is perhaps the most gentle sea creature you could possibly imagine, right? Like the least menacing baseball mascot that I can think of, the Manatees, and it was perfect. Why was that such a great fit?
Yeah, I mean, and it is pretty counterintuitive, right? Like even a dolphin is somehow more intimidating than a manatee. That's like Flipper, who's like our best friend and our greatest helper. Even a manatee somehow makes Flipper look menacing. I just think manatees are so iconic in Florida, but specifically along the Indian River Lagoon, which is this 150-mile long estuary on the east coast of Florida that runs from roughly Volusia County, which is Daytona, down to Palm Beach County, which is Jupiter. It's this huge biodiverse estuary that's filled with thousands of species, and probably no more iconic species in the entire Indian River Lagoon system exists than the manatee. And the Indian River Lagoon is just it's a place where manatees love to congregate. It's their natural habitat. They go in there for warmth in the wintertime, for respite from, cold offshore waters. And they go in there to forage on thousands upon thousands of acres of seagrass. And so the manatee is incredibly closely associated with the Indian River Lagoon, as much or more so than any other part of Florida. And so, yes, it's not intimidating. It's not scary. It's not, flashy, but it is so part of the Floridian identity that it's a natural fit.
JP, one of the questions I ask a lot is, what are the characteristics of a manatee that would make it a good baseball player, since they're a mascot?
I don't know. I mean, I think they'd probably be overall pretty terrible. I don't know. Maybe they'd make a good catcher or something, just kind of putting up a barricade for people trying to steal home or something. I'm not sure.
I was reading something recently that made me laugh about Christopher Columbus saw the manatees and was disappointed that they were, because he thought they were mermaids. And he thought they would be, for lack of a better term, he thought they would be hotter than they were. And he was a little disappointed that the the manatees were less hot than they should have been. That's a hilarious sort of history to this animal. Is that something, is that a big part of their story, or is that just something I saw on social media that's kind of funny?
No, I think it definitely is. I mean, I think, that is sort of a funny part of their lore. I mean, we call them sea cows, and they're these docile creatures that wander around eating grass. I mean, the idea that, someone confused them for mermaids, is pretty wild. Have you ever seen a manatee yourself?
I have seen a manatee. I've seen them in captivity at zoos and aquaria, but one time I saw them floating around in like a kind of a bay it was sort of a boat dock. And so I feel like I haven't really truly seen them in the wild, but I did see one once that was not in captivity.
Yeah, well, and if you've seen them,
Yeah.
you can attest that they're huge, right?
Yes.
I mean, they can be 1,000 pounds. I mean,
Yeah.
these are not small creatures. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think it's extra funny that, the European explorers and colonists, saw these manatees and thought that's a mermaid because I mean these are gigantic creatures, they're really big.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about the manatees in a moment, but before we do, I want to talk about the baseball experience at the ballpark with the manatees. Part of that, of course, is this brand.
Yeah.
You were a kid. This was before you got involved in the conservation work that you're doing now. But this brand, has this adorable manatee. It was Hugh Manatee, Hugh Manatee. I just said that out loud for the first time. I get it now. And then Hugh became Manny. This team was around from 1994 to 2016. So it was Hugh Manatee, which is hilarious. I can't believe I'm just realizing that. And then after 2001 was Manny Manatee. This logo, in retrospect, in hindsight, you see this logo now. How good a job do you think it does sort of capturing the personality, capturing the essence of manatees as a critter?
Yeah, I think it's great, honestly, because I mean, when we think of manatees, it's not like with sharks with sharp teeth.
Mm,
It's soft edges, it's kind of a puffy sort of jocular, sort of friendly figure.
yeah.
And I think that the logo really captures that well. I mean, and the people call them potatoes sometimes, like sea potatoes. And I think, that sort of is conveyed in the logo. It's this creature that's just sort of gentle and soft and puffy and cuddly even. And I think the cuddliness of the humanity logo, really comes through. I remember the naming of Hugh Manatee because that was also done by a vote, if I recall. And yeah, there were some other names, but Hugh was really the one that came to the forefront. And it is funny. It's a funny pun.
I can't believe it took me till now to get it. Did you go to many games? I mean, once you actually got the baseball team there, was that a regular part of your experience growing up?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it was a real treat to go to games, both for because Marlins did some spring training there. They eventually moved to Vieira, which was used to be a big farm area in south central Brevard County. They built some stadiums there for the Marlins spring training, and then also, of course, for the Manatees regular games. And going to either the Marlins spring training or the Manatees regular games was really a treat. I remember, my mom would take me out of school for the specific intent of going to see a ball game, and it was just always extremely exciting. And these were the new fields that they built in Vieira were state of the art at the time for minor league teams or even for spring training. And it was just super exciting to go to these brand new kind of flashy, showy stadiums that they just put in really what used to be a cattle pasture. Now it's completely surrounded by tract homes and strip malls. But at the time, it was kind of interesting and exciting to go to this palatial new ball field out in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
Florida obviously has a lot of minor league baseball, and you mentioned spring training, of course. Is there a team now that's the closest to you? Do you still have a minor league ballpark that's your regular go-to?
Yeah, my wife is Canadian.
Oh,
And so Blue Jays are a preferred team. And I live in Pinellas County, and Dunedin is one of the northernmost cities in Pinellas County. So when we can, we'll go see the Blue Jays play. My brother-in-law's family are Pittsburgh fans. And so
oh,
we'll go to Bradenton for Pittsburgh games during spring training. That's a really great stadium there. It's got a kind of an old school feel. It's like very I don't know. It kind of feels like you're in a bit of a time warp when you go to that particular stadium, especially if you're under the cover there in the seats right behind home plate. And we'll also occasionally, just for the thrill factor, go out to Lakeland to the old Joker Marchand Stadium, which is another one of those old school spring training stadiums where the Tigers play.
yeah.
That's fun. It's a cool. I like those old stadium feel, the old stadium feel. Just kind of real nostalgic and charming.
I went to a Tigers spring training game for the first time this past year. I'm a Phillies fan. We were visiting Clearwater to go see the Phillies play, and the Phillies had a road game at Joker Marchand Stadium there, and so we went out and saw them play there. Yeah, that's a classic feeling ballpark, and still well kept, but
Yeah.
a great place to see a ball game.
It's funny because you're a Phillies fan, you went to go see them play in Clearwater. That's probably the closest training facility to where I actually live, and I've never been.
Oh, it
Just by
is.
quirk of fate. I mean, it's just never happened.
It's a beautiful ballpark. Being from the Philadelphia area originally, for me, like they do a good cheesesteak. They've got all like the sort of Philly amenities there. That may not mean too much to you, but for me as a native Philadelphian, a displaced Philadelphian, that did mean a lot to me. I do want to ask a sort of baseball related question with the Ocean Conservancy here. Manatees made a great logo. I'm sure it was heartbreaking for you to lose that team in 2016, I think is when that team went away. But there are, such amazing diversity of wildlife. Are there animals, marine animals, that you think would make a great baseball mascot that hasn't been a baseball mascot yet?
Yeah, well, it's funny you asked that because I'm all for the whimsy, right?
Yeah.
Like I like the idea of the manatees because I think it's funny. I
Yeah.
think it's cute, you know?
Yeah.
So I think of, other non-intimidating or not obvious marine creatures that are in the Florida environment, like for example, a sea slug. Like how funny would that be if the team was called the Sea Slugs?
Yes.
Another name for sea slug is nudibranch, which would be an even funnier name,
That is very funny. Yeah, absolutely. And you saw how successful the banana slugs were in
Exactly.
California, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, people kind of gravitate towards those kind of weird names. So yeah, sea slugs and nudibranchs, I think that would be kind of a funny name. But I mean, you can never go wrong with some of the charismatic megafauna that, Florida is known for. So like
Yeah.
bull sharks or any kind of shark is gonna, be an awesome name for a team for sure.
Manatees themselves, I want to get back to the manatees. There are a number of people who I know, and myself included, right? Like I've got the manatees t-shirt when we visit Florida. Like we made it specifically a trip to the Moat Marine Center there to see the manatees, and that was a big part of that trip. People love manatees, right? Like they are super endearing, and people have this great connection to them. And you've described a lot of those sort of characteristics that draw people to them. Obviously the manatees, as you have progressed in your life and your career, you were a baseball fan, you liked the manatees as a kid. Now you're doing this conservation work. What is it about the manatees beyond they're endearing, they're round, they're cuddly, they look friendly? What is it about the manatees that draws you to them in your professional conservation work that you're doing?
Well, manatees are a keystone species of the Florida environment. They're big and iconic, but they're also an indicator for healthy Florida environment. An individual manatee needs to eat 10% of its body mass in seagrass every day. So that's up to 100 pounds of seagrass for one manatee. And there are between 8 and 10,000 manatees in Florida right now. So there's a tremendous need for seagrass. So if the manatee population is healthy, so is too the seagrass population. And when our seagrass populations are failing because of compromised water quality, because of too much human-borne nutrient pollution and waste that we put in the water, that affects our seagrass, which in turn affects our manatees. And so, just a few years back, we had a pretty significant mortality event for manatees where we were losing lots and lots of manatees. In fact, record numbers of manatees were dying off. They were starving to death because we had created situations in Florida where our water quality was so compromised that the seagrass was dying and the manatees were becoming famished and dying. And so I think that the manatee really, if we have thriving manatee populations, it really showcases clean, healthy Florida water. And I think that's what, we in the conservation community are really working towards, is creating conditions in the Florida environment that allow iconic creatures like manatees to thrive.
In this article that you wrote, which was in 2021, at the end of it, you called your call for action was, one of the first obvious things that we can do is relist the manatees as endangered. Where do we stand on that now? Is that still a critical need for us? And has that happened?
It has not happened. And I do think that relisting the manatee as endangered will provide certain legal protections for manatees that are important. And so certainly would advocate for that and would encourage people to reach out to their elected officials to ask for that kind of relisting. But it's not a silver bullet. I think that what we really need in Florida is comprehensive water quality reforms. We need growth management. People love Florida, but we're loving Florida to death. We've got 1,000 people moving to Florida every single day.
Oh my
That's
God.
a huge strain on our infrastructure. And if our wastewater systems can't keep up with 1,000 people moving to Florida every day, our water quality is going to suffer. And so I think that in Florida, a relisting of the manatee as endangered certainly helps, but it definitely won't solve the problem that manatees are facing, the existential problem that they're facing, without more comprehensive legal reforms that address just the litany of problems associated with growth and with pollution.
JP, before we let you go, tell us about the Ocean Conservancy. This is an organization whose work, like I said, it's extremely important work that's happening, and it's getting more and more critical to take steps. What is the Ocean Conservancy, and what all are you doing there?
Ocean Conservancy is the nation's oldest marine conservation nonprofit organization, and we were founded in 1972. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we have a few geographic locations that we really focus on, Florida being one of those. The Arctic is another specific place that we focus on, so we have staff in Alaska. But we have programmatic issues that we hone in on, fisheries issues, climate issues, ocean water quality issues, shipping. These kinds of things are what OC works on closely, and we work at that nexus of science and policy. We advocate for policy changes that are underpinned by strong science that we also work on. I'm not a scientist. I'm a lawyer by training, but that's exactly what OC is made of. We're made of scientists and lawyers. And we found that that is the recipe for achieving meaningful, durable change for our oceans. And we've had a lot of success in bringing back depleted fish stocks, in reducing nutrient pollution, in raising awareness on issues like climate. And I think it's because we're able to bring that science-driven policy message that at the end of the day really resonates.
I just think about the number of teams that have based their identities on the wildlife, the marine life in Florida. And I've always said you can tell the story of America by understanding why minor league baseball teams are called what they're called. And when you look at the number of teams, you've got the Threshers, you've got the Hammerheads, you've got the Pensacola Blue Wahoos, you've got the Jumbo Shrimp, you've got the Daytona Tortugas. I mean, I could just keep going on and on and on about, teams named for marine life in Florida. To me, that represents how important that is to all of us, to the global community. And, so the work that you're doing there is incredibly important. And so I appreciate you taking a moment out of your busy day to chat with me about the Brevard County Manatees. I do have to know, do you have any gear from when you were a fan? Do you have a Manatees cap or a T-shirt, anything like that?
I definitely have a manatee's cap in a box somewhere in my attic. I'm sure of it because I know I had one when I was a kid. So, but as far as other stuff goes, couldn't say, but definitely there's a cap somewhere.
That's fantastic. Well, it's a classic team, and when I found your article, I was like, yeah, I got to have this conversation. So I really do appreciate you taking that time. JP, where can people find you and the work that you're doing, and where can people find the Ocean Conservancy online, social media, that sort of thing?
You can go to my personal website, jpbrooker.com, and find out all about my work. And you can go to oceanconservancy.org and find out all about Ocean Conservancy's programs and initiatives and see how you can get involved and work to make a difference for the ocean that you so love and care about.
I do love the ocean. I said that was my last question, and I lied to you because I think this is important as well. For listeners of the podcast, they're all over the country. I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado. Colorado is a headwater state. Every river that exists in Colorado starts in Colorado and then goes out into other states. The ecosystem is a huge interconnected network, and I'm aware that if I use fertilizer on my lawn, it ends up somewhere in an ocean. It's affecting marine life. What can folks who are listening all over the country do to help support conservation just individually?
Well, I think you're exactly right that a single drop of water that starts inland is going to make its way out to the ocean in some way, shape, or form. And I think that being a good steward of your water and knowing that connection is the first step in making a difference for our oceans and coasts. That can mean, reducing things like your fertilizer load, and being cognizant of the impacts that your personal pollution are going to have on your local watersheds. That's certainly an aspect of it. Increasingly, we're seeing the havoc that plastic can wreak on our oceans, even from upstream sources, in the form of microplastics. So, while we're talking about pollution, fertilizer getting into the watershed, microplastics are really kind of an unseen threat, very similar to the conventional pollution that we're worried about. So I think that working to address plastic debris, plastic pollution head on, and also trying to find new, unique, novel ways to address the microplastics that come from the larger plastics is, I think, really important. And so there are personal choices that you can make that include avoiding single-use plastic items. That's a bare minimum. But there's a lot more that I think folks can and should be aware of, especially as the microplastic threat increases, and should be talking to their elected officials about addressing.
JP, thank you again. I realize I've wrapped up like 3 times now, but I keep thinking of things I wanted to ask you about. So thank you so much. This has been great. And thank you for the work that Ocean Conservancy does. And I'm so glad you wrote that article about the manatees, because it's such an endearing brand, but the story beneath it is so important about the work that needs to be done to help conserve our oceans and our marine life. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It is time once again for Studio Simon Stumpers. And of course, bringing you a Studio Simon Stumper, as he does every single week, my very good friend, Dan Simon. Dan, hello, welcome back. How you been?
I was fantastic when you asked me in the intro, and I continue to be fantastic. And speaking of the intro, you mentioned in the intro that when the manatees left Vieira, Florida, you didn't mention Vieira, but
I did not mention Vieira. Yeah,
I'm
okay,
going to
thank
mention
you.
that. They left Vieira, Florida in 2016 and moved to Kissimmee, where they became the Florida Fire Frogs.
They should have been called the I'm Irishes.
Right.
The Kissimmee I'm Irish, yeah.
Or the Kissimmee You Fools.
You fools. Oh, that was your, yeah. You've made that joke before on this podcast. I like it very much.
And so when they did leave, they being the Manatees, joined a fairly long list of defunct Florida State League teams, which perhaps ironically now also includes the Florida Fire Frogs.
Yes.
So with all that in mind, our Studio Simon Stumper today asks, which of these 3 teams was not an actual former Florida State League team? Was it the Tampa Smokers, the Pompano Beach Toucans, or the Key West Conchs?
I feel like I have a vague memory of the Conchs from our friend Todd Radum's reimagining of historic logos. I don't know if I'm just making that up or not, but I feel like the Key West Conchs is one that I actually have in the back of my brain there. The Tampa Smokers sounds like it could be real. I don't know how big the tobacco industry was in Florida. And the Pompano Beach Toucans, I can envision a really vibrant logo for that team, but I don't know. So this is one you said on a recent episode that you prefer not to have me just have to just take a wild guess. This were one where if I had more actual knowledge of these brands, which is not out of the question, it does seem like something that I could have, but I don't, Dan. So I'm going to say that the Key West Conchs and the Tampa Smokers are real, and the Pompano Beach Toucans are the fake one.
And you would be correct.
Aha, wild guess does it again. That's my technique, Dan. Wild guess.
Well, you started with what you referred to as a vague recollection of artwork done by friend of the show, Todd Radom, for the Key West Conchs. And that vague, maybe one of the reasons that it's vague is because you don't get to see that artwork much, but that was a correct recollection. He did do a reimagined logo for the Key West Conchs that was part of a series of logos he did for former teams where he made up logos that looked like they would have been used for those teams. And obviously they're all great. So the Key West Conchs only played from 1972 to 1974. There have been other teams in Key West, but the Conchs were just those 3 seasons. The Tampa Smokers, now, by the way, I think you said that you weren't certain if cigars are like associated with Tampa. They're associated with Tampa big time.
Okay.
Now, maybe more specifically, Ybor City, which is, I don't think it's part of Tampa. I think it's adjacent to Tampa, but it's the greater Tampa area. But also I remember there being, and maybe there still are, cigars named Have a Tampa.
Oh.
It's supposed to sound like Havana, Have a Tampa. HAV -A-Tampa. So Tampa is very much, cigars are very much associated with Tampa and Ybor City.
Okay.
And now Pompano Beach Toucans is not an actual team. Pompano Beach has had teams, but they had boring names like the Pompano Beach Cubs and the Pompano Beach Mets.
Yeah.
But Toucans was when I was working with the team in Tampa, the Tampa now Tarpons, when we were working on renaming them, one of the names that I presented was the Tampa Toucans, because in Tampa's Lowry Park Zoo, they have a free flight aviary with all kinds of exotic birds, including toucans, and it made a good alliterative name.
Yeah.
But I was not the first sports branding professional to propose that name for a team. Here's where things come full circle.
Here we go.
Because the friend of the show gentleman at Brandiose proposed that name as one of the Name the Team finalists for the team that ultimately became the Florida Fire Frogs.
Oh, how about that? That's I did not know that. That's that Fire Frogs logo is one that I think was really well received and I think was really fun. And if they had just stuck around long enough, I think people like frogs in general, and they had like 4 different frogs, and so that's one that I probably would have ended up with a hat for at some point, but they just weren't around long enough. But they certainly weren't around long enough to have a what might have been night, and they could have played as the Toucans. So maybe someday we'll get these all back. Maybe someday someone will acquire the rights to the Manatees, and we'll have a throwback to the Brevard County Manatees, and that logo will be somehow revived. Otherwise, Dan, it lives on in the form of this podcast episode, and it was fun to talk about manatees for, 45 minutes to an hour, however long it's been. So thank you for your part in that, as always, Dan, and we'll see you again next week.
Okay, I'll see you then.